Hey guys, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today we are looking at Mooncat's final collection of the year called My Inner Apocalypse. This emo inspired lineup consists of 8 specialty finish polishes, 2 of which are magnetics. I do have a ton of comparisons for these as well, so I will save more of my thoughts after that. For now, let's just get into the swatches, I guess. The first polish we have is Bottled Rage, and this is a dark burgundy red-black lacquer filled with red-orange shimmer. So I think I pretty much would call this like a warm leaning black. It really is a super dark shade, and in most lightings it is going to look black with like a little bit of something with that shimmer. As you can see on the first coat, I got really great coverage, no surprise considering it is such a dark shade. And on 2 coats, this was fully opaque for me, and I don't know if it was just my camera not really picking it up well, but I would say in real life too, the shimmer is just a bit more subtle in these polishes. Again, it could be because this is such a dark shade that there's not that much contrast, but it pretty much is more or less a red version of Access Denied or The 13th Hour. But yeah, overall, I still really love this one. It's actually one of my favorites from this set, and it even leans a little bit yellow in indirect lighting. The next polish we have is Nightcrawler, and this is a dark, smoky gray-purple lacquer filled with a soft purple shimmer. And even though it doesn't mention it on the website, I would say that the shimmer is a little bit of a multi-chrome, or at the very least a duochrome, where it's a blue-purple head-on, but in slightly indirect lighting, it leans a little bit more pinky purple, which I actually really love. So on the first coat, this one again has really great, even coverage. Even though these are all shimmers, they're definitely not as sheer as other Mooncat shimmers, for example, again because they are all super dark shades, so they are just going to be a little bit more pigmented. But yeah, I would say the majority of these are going to be solid 2-coaters for most people, especially if you have shorter nails or just nails not longer than mine. I would say the shimmer on this one is a little bit on the subtle side too, where it just kind of blends in with the base color, but it's still a really beautiful shade, especially with the pink shift. The next polish we have is Misery is my favorite color, and this is a slate blue lacquer filled with electric blue shimmer. So as you probably know, I am a big fan of slate blue polishes. I don't know what it is about this grayed out shade, but it is just something so beautiful to me, especially for this time of year. So I knew I was gonna love this one, especially with that bright blue shimmer. This one pretty much had the same formula and application as the previous 2 polishes, where it applied well on the first coat. It was pretty even coverage, just a tiny bit sheer, but I ended up getting full opacity on the second coat. The base color does deepen up a little bit, but it still is very noticeably blue-gray and not as dark as the previous 2. I think I'm gonna love this for the winter. The next shade is This is a Storm Warning, and this is described as a light purple-gray magnetic lacquer filled with a soft violet blue shimmer and micro holographic glitter that reveals a silver magnetic stripe. So I don't know how well you caught that, but I didn't really see a super strong magnetic stripe once I moved the magnet away, and I usually keep it for the same amount of time when I do these types of clips. So I was a little bit nervous about that, but it did seem to show up pretty well when I was doing my regular cat eye swatches, especially where I'm holding the magnet underneath my nail. Obviously, if you want a crisp line, the best is to hold it over your nail, but I just am not good at doing that. So I found the base on this one was a little bit more sheer compared to the other shades so far. So here on 2 coats, I feel like I could see my nail line a little bit more. So I ended up doing a 3rd coat for the cat eye effect, and it gave me full opacity. And I think you only need 3 coats for this effect specifically. When I did the velvet effect and just applying the polish straight out of the bottle, I just needed 2 coats and not a 3rd. This one responds really well with the velvet effect, and I love the contrast with the blue shimmer. Next we have Full Scream Ahead, and this is a light mint green holographic shimmer. I think I would almost call this one like a mint blue. Maybe it just is really hard to tell because that green shimmer is super, super strong. But either way, I absolutely love this polish. I'm always such a sucker for Mooncat polishes that have a strong green shimmer like this. And in combination with the base color, it is just so, so beautiful. So even though this is the lightest color in the lineup, it definitely is still really full coverage. I found it opaque enough for me on 2 coats. Maybe in some angles you could see a little bit of nail line, but I just don't think it's necessary to do a third. Up next we have Drown My Demons, and this is a deep ocean blue magnetic lacquer that reveals a green magnetic stripe. So this is the second magnetic from the collection, and I would say it's a little bit more on the simple side, especially compared to the first one that had this extra blue contrasting shimmer. This one is pretty much just a blue and green kind of color. As you can see, this one has a little bit of a jelly leaning formula, so it is a little bit more squishy looking, not super full coverage on the first coat like the other shades. And even though it does have a dark base color, I found that it just wasn't evenly opaque enough for me on the second coat. It could be my application or my nail length, but I just found that the base was still a little bit sheer, so I saw some of those like specks that you saw in the first coat. So I ended up doing a third just to get it fully opaque, and it becomes a super, super dark blue. It's absolutely gorgeous though, especially in contrast with this green shimmer. As I mentioned before, I'm a fan of green shimmer, and this one looks super gorgeous with a velvet effect. This one again responded really well because it has more of that jelly leaning base color, so the magnetic shimmer is able to move around a bit more freely, so it creates this really pretty contrast. The next polish is Monster Under Your Head, and this is a dark olive green linear holographic. So if you've been a follower of mine, whether on Instagram or just here on YouTube, you might remember that I've mentioned before that I never was a big green polish lover, and specifically olive greens. I just kind of always hated them, but over the years I have grown to love them, and it's just been such a fun and interesting thing to see how my tastes have changed, because I feel like years ago I would have hated this color, or at least just not liked it on me, but now I was like, wow, this is such a beautiful, beautiful shade. I would consider this more of a fall color for me personally, but it is absolutely gorgeous, perfectly opaque in 2 coats, and such a strong hollow finish. The formula was super smooth too. And rounding out this set is Like a Moth to a Flame, and this is a smoky gray lacquer filled with color shifting red to orange to green shimmer. So this is basically like a gray version of Bottled Rage, where that one had more of a black base, but this is a little bit lighter and more obviously gray leaning. And at first I didn't love that. I don't know, I don't always love when there are similar colors released in the same collection, but ultimately I was pretty forgiving of this shade because I think I'm just especially a sucker for a red shimmer, and I don't know, I just really loved it against the gray, maybe even a little bit more than against the darker blackened burgundy. So at least you have the option, and this one was also opaque in 2 coats. So on brand for this collection, the sun was just not out when I did my Skittle swatches. So this is what they look like on a pretty overcast, dreary day. So from index to pinky, I'm wearing Bottled Rage, Like a Moth to a Flame, Monster Under Your Head, and Drown My Demons, unmagnetized by the way. And then on my thumb, I have Misery Is My Favorite Color. I really loved how these made like a dark rainbow. So then on my other hand, from pinky to index, I'm wearing Misery Is My Favorite Color, Nightcrawler. This is a Storm Warning with a cat eye effect, and then Full Scream Ahead. So you can see just how dark and moody these colors are, I guess with the exception of Full Scream Ahead. That one's pretty bright. And I almost forgot to mention, on my thumb, I repeated Like a Moth to a Flame, and this is another super dark, moody shade, but it's still not as dark as Bottled Rage. And here is the collection lineup. I have these arranged sort of in a rainbow order, where I kind of just put the ones that have very similar shimmers kind of next to each other. But you can see the shimmers are still very different. They're not like the exact same between any 2 polishes. But like I mentioned before, I thought the shimmers in these were a little bit more on the subtle side, at least in some of the polishes, where they only really showed up in direct lighting. Here in indirect lighting, you can just kind of see how it's a lot more subdued, where you just see the base colors in some of them. So getting into comparisons, we're starting with Bottled Rage and looking at it next to Gates of Hell, which Mooncat describes as a blackened base with a red multi-chrome shimmer, but this base to me is a bit more eggplanty maybe, and there's also Holo in there. So I thought a closer comparison would be next to Sin Eater from the more recent Band of Misfits collection. This one is in a burgundy base, but has a more similar red, fiery kind of shimmer. But once you see them on the nail, you can actually tell them all apart pretty easily. Gates of Hell again has a little bit of a purple leaning black base. Bottled Rage is more of a true black base, and again Sin Eater has a little bit more of a burgundy leaning color, and the shimmer definitely stands out the strongest in that one. It's the most subtle in Bottled Rage. Then for Nightcrawler, I really wanted to see this next to Mortals Be Warned, which is one of Mooncat's most popular multi-chromes. This also shifts from purple to pink, but it's in a darker, almost blackened base. So I thought maybe I could layer it over Essie's Carols and Caviar because it's like this grayed out kind of base color. And it's not bad, but I think it would have been a closer match if the base color was more of a warm purpley color instead. But even still, the shimmer in Mortals Be Warned is a lot stronger and not as subtle as in Nightcrawler. So even though I knew they weren't dupes, I still wanted to show Misery is my favorite color next to the 13th Hour, which is a black base with blue shimmer. I would say the shimmer color is a little bit different too, where it's more of like a brighter or electric cobalt on Misery is my favorite color, and obviously the base is more gray. So I thought it could be worth trying to recreate using Holo Taco's Freezer Burn layered over Essie's Carols and Caviar, which I'm using instead of Cold Slate because that one is just too light of a gray. It's not dark and moody enough. So here's what that combination looks like. And again, it's not bad. It's kind of the similar vibes, but Essie's Carols and Caviar is definitely a little too gray and not as steely blue as the base in Misery is. So if you have Freezer Burn, it might work with a different base color. Then for Full Scream Ahead, I wanted to see this next to Antivenom from the Medusa collection. This is more of a true white base in a scattered hollow glitter type of formula, but it still has a bright greenish yellow golden shimmer. So I thought something closer might be Mooncat's Pixiestick, which has more of a vibrant green shimmer, but that one is a little bit more iridescent leaning and again is in a white shimmery base, while Full Scream Ahead is more of like that minty, icy, almost blue linear hollow formula. So here is one coat of each on the nail. Again, these are all very like full coverage and the shimmer stands out in them equally well, I would say. I guess if you do wear them in one coat, it might be kind of hard to tell them apart, but on two coats, you really start to see the difference in their base colors and finishes. So I have a couple of comparisons for Drown My Demons, starting with Gamma Ray Blaster, which was unfortunately retired earlier this year. This one isn't a magnetic, but it almost has the same kind of green shimmer in a blue base color, but obviously the blue in Gamma Ray Blaster is a lot lighter and brighter, so it's almost like the summer version of Drown My Demons if you were to just wear that without a magnetic effect, if that makes sense. So they're definitely not dupes, so I thought maybe I could still show this next to Sunken Splendor, which was another recently retired shade. This one is a magnetic, but it's in a lighter jade green base with more of a golden shimmer, so definitely not dupes. And here it is next to Weeping Willow, which is also magnetic, but this one is an emerald green base with a strong green shimmer and silver reflective glitters, so also not dupes. So the last Mooncat comparison that I have is next to Poseidon's Prize, which is a blue jelly base with this aqua to green leaning shimmer. There is also those reflective glitters in here, but I just figured because it's in a blue base, it would be the most comparable, but these are nowhere near dupes. Poseidon's Prize is much lighter and almost like a turquoise leaning blue, and it doesn't have as strong of a green shimmer. I think the closest color to compare Drown My Demons to would be ILNP's Enchantment because it's this darkened teal jelly base color with a strong gold green shifting shimmer. There are these additional hollow flakies in ILNP, which you'll see in a minute, but if you just apply them straight out of the bottle with no magnetic effect, you can see that the shimmer in ILNP is a lot stronger or just more concentrated overall. So it's not as subtle as in Drown My Demons, but the biggest difference is when you use them with a cat eye effect because it reveals all of those flakies in ILNP, so there's just like a lot more going on in that polish, while Drown My Demons is more on the simple side. It's just a jelly base with a magnetic shimmer. And then here they are with the velvet effect. I am gonna say I did not do a great job on the ILNP side. I feel like it just doesn't look as shifty and contrasty, but I know that I've gotten that look before, so don't mind that too much, but Drown My Demons definitely has a beautiful velvet effect. And the last comparison I have for Drown My Demons is next to Cirque Color's Mood Ring, which is another tealy blue kind of base color, but this one has more of a lime green to gold shifting shimmer. So here with the cat eye effect on two coats, you can see that these are not dupes color-wise, but they're the most similar when it comes to just the basic jelly magnetic formula. Cirque's is a lot more sheer though. Then for Monster Under Your Head, I wanted to show this next to The Stranger, which is Mooncat's olive green cream. This one is more of like a true olive shade. It can look a little darker in some lightings, but it's just nowhere near as dark as Monster Under Your Head. So the closest dark olive that I have is Olive Abs Wild, which just released from their fall collection this year. This one has a gold shimmer and doesn't have any linear holographic pigment, so obviously that's going to be a stark difference, but just for the base colors, these are a pretty good match. So I thought to layer Cirque Colors We Trippy over Olive Abs Wild to try to recreate Monster Under Your Head. We Trippy is just a silver holographic topper, so while it does kind of help, it's a little too silver and not as gold as Monster Under Your Head. And lastly, for Like a Moth to a Flame, I don't have anything like it in my collection, so I thought to try and recreate it by using Essie's Home by 8 as the base color and then layering Holo Taco's Scorched Earth on top of that, because it pretty much has that same fiery red to orange to yellow shifting shimmer. And honestly, I would say this one was probably the closest recreation of all the ones that I tried today. The shimmer seems pretty on point, but the main difference is the base color, again, where Essie's is a little darker and maybe warmer. So it's not an exact dupe, but a pretty good alternative if you happen to have these two. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons for Mooncat's My Inner Apocalypse collection. I would love to know what your thoughts are on this release because I really enjoyed it. I mean, as a theme, I feel like it is just so perfectly on brand for Mooncat, and so I love just seeing the marketing surrounding this release. It just was so much fun, especially to see them kind of describe it as like an EP, and believe it or not, I actually am a big fan of like emo and alternative kind of music. So I really did enjoy like that inspiration and like leaning into it. I know it might be so like unexpected because you normally see me as like this bubbly, happy, light person. I don't remember if I said this around the Underworld collection, but I just love when Mooncat does these like super dark and moody type of releases. But don't get me wrong, obviously I still really love when they do like the colorful mermaid and summer releases or the light and ethereal fairy inspired polishes, but I don't know, it's just so satisfying seeing like such a dark lineup of shades from this brand. Overall, I'm really enjoying these shades. I do think they are really beautiful. I'm just not super in love with them, which I kind of hate saying. I mean, I definitely have mentioned it a couple of times at this point throughout the video that these shimmers are just so dark that I feel like it just ends up being a very subtle effect compared to other Mooncat shimmers that are like super eye-catching, for example. I guess I'm still figuring out how I feel about that because obviously I love shimmers that are a lot more eye-catching. These are like great for the winter season and just like any kind of moody, dreary days. Just like looking at my nails, I feel like they are a little bit simple or just subtle, like I've mentioned before, where the shimmers like don't really pop and glow as much. I don't mean to say that in a way that like they let me down or anything, but I don't know, in a way I just noticed that they're almost a little bit basic compared to other Mooncat shimmers or polishes in general, where they either just have a lot going on, or even with just their shimmer polishes, there's like a little extra oomph to them. I don't know what it is exactly about these that makes me feel that way, because again, I do think they are gorgeous colors, especially for this time of year. Yeah, I think for some of the shades, I wish the shimmer stood out in them a little bit more and it wasn't as obscured. Make sure to let me know which one was your favorite and if you picked up the whole collection or just one or two of them. And thank you all so much for your patience, because I was originally planning to have this video up yesterday on Sunday, but I still had to record my intro and outro, and it was just dark and rainy all day. And I know it totally fits like the vibes, but like I mentioned before, the winter is just kind of hard for me sometimes. Like I really get super low energy. Yeah, it was just really hard to do it yesterday, but we're here now, and hopefully you still enjoyed these comparisons. Again, let me know any and all thoughts you have down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.